G-spec case. Conditionality good. Counterclaim Supreme Court politics. Concede their argument that specification arguments are regressive because they're not rooted in the resolution. That's fine for us. We're not going for the sheet of paper in terms of the RBI. The first argument talks about substance crowd out. Our argument is that this is absolutely inevitable in debate. If we didn't read G-spec, we would just read some other argument that would also crowd out the substance, which means there's no uniqueness to this argument. Additionally, if we don't go for the sheet of paper, there's no reason why this should matter. This could only be characterized as a reason to reject this particular sheet of paper, especially when they just say RBI but don't actually isolate why this argument would be a specific voting issue. Additionally, our argument is that the crowding out of substance in terms of procedural arguments is a good thing. We will impact on this argument in terms of the fact that procedural arguments are a critical gateway to engaging in the substance debate. For example, we make arguments in G-spec indicating why this kind of specification is critical to dissat and pick ground, which means if substance is a good thing, this is a prior question to this argument, but if we don't go for this sheet of paper, this should not manifest in a cheap shot PMR. Additionally, you talk about the time trade-off. Our argument is that this is absolutely inevitable. We would just read other arguments you would link to. Additionally, your model of debate is raised to the bottom in a world where we wouldn't have the ability to collapse in the block. That would mean that we would have to go for every single argument in the block, which would make it impossible for the PMR to have a speech because you have 5 minutes to follow 12 minutes of offense, which would make it impossible for you to win the debate, which means this is a bad model of debate. Additionally, if you think this argument is bad in terms of trading off of the substance, that's a reason not to privilege this argument in the PMR because that would justify the PMR being substantive. If we don't go for this argument, they should not have to do that either. Additionally, to extend their argument, the procedural questions are premised on intervention because evaluation of the stance debate is interventionist, and that's raised to the bottom. That is also a reason why you will not privilege RBI arguments because those are also premised on procedural debate. For example, it is a procedural question to suggest that we should have to lose for this sheet of paper, which is a reason why you should not get a manifest the PMR in a total sheep shot case debate. Extend the argument that advantage 2 is solved better because Congress is perceived as the big brother, not the Supreme Court, which means our counterplan absolutely accesses a massive solvency surplus over the advantage 2 debate. There is no answer to this argument. Additionally, they flag their advantage 2 arguments as the most important subject in the debate, which means you can evaluate the solvency surplus to advantage 2 arguments as a reason to vote negative, even independent of our dissent, because their impact turns are not compelling enough. They make these G-spec preempts. That's fine. We don't even go for our G-spec argument. They talk about mutual deterrence. If you extend that argument, that's a reason why they don't solve the internal link to their first argument because it indicates why it is inevitable that people will not engage in bullying. If mutual deterrence is the factor, then there's no reason why you solve your case anymore. Additionally, we make the argument that there's no mindset shift. You said that there's a shift in action, but our argument is that the mindset is what justifies the action, which means if you don't change the mindset, that action is still inevitable. You also don't have a good answer to the backlash arguments. You just talked about how there's monitoring the status quo that's more intense. If that would be true, that would dismantle a lot of your uniqueness arguments. You've also conceded the argument that there would be less regulations, which is the internal link to a lot of these backlash arguments. You've also conceded the non-students arguments, which means that the internal link to this argument is not strong enough to overcome the solvency surplus in terms of the advantage 2 debate. You should privilege our impact calculus on that subject. Conditionality good. Our first argument is that they have no warrant for any of these arguments. These come out in the last 10 seconds of the MG. You should not privilege these arguments. Additionally, we'll defend conditionality. We'll defend unconditionality. Our argument is that model of debate is better because if they read a bunch of dissats in the counterclaim, we'd be stuck with those arguments. In a world of conditionality, we would be able to shift out of those arguments and go to link arguments that are only premised on the dissat, which would make it impossible for you to win strategically. That is not good. Our next argument is that we should be able to defend the counterclaim in the block. Our argument is that even if conditionality was a good thing, that's not a reason to say that people should never be unconditional. It's just a reason why when you are on the negative, you could read your counterclaim as unconditional. That would also solve all the offense if any of these arguments were unique. Additionally, you characterize this argument as critical to education. We don't have a reason why this is a voting issue. Just saying independent voter and reasonability does not make sense. In fact, reasonability is a reason why you should not privilege a sheet of paper because it indicates why we are a model of debate that is reasonable. If we win that unconditionality is reasonable, then you would not privilege this argument. Additionally, our argument is that unconditionality is good because it's the only world in which we can make it possible for your answers to the counterclaim to possibly be relevant. In a world of your model of debate, that would be impossible. It would take a lot of PMR extrapolation in order for them to go for this argument because they literally read this argument in the last 20 seconds of the MG without any extrapolation of any of these arguments. Additionally, if you resolve this question in terms of the stance debate, they have to win that it is more fair to be conditional than unconditional. I find it enormously difficult to believe that that could be the case. Counterclaim. They make the argument that the counterclaim would be rolled back in terms of being perceived as unconstitutional, but we have preemption arguments indicating why this is equally as durable as your case. In other words, if rollback is possible in terms of it being ruled as unconstitutional, that's the same reason why the fact that the precedent goes both directions is the reason why your case could be rolled back, which means that we should get equal durability for all solvency arguments to compare whether or not the counterclaim is better than the plan. That is an argument that we preempt. You've also conceded the argument that the counterclaim has a better solvency surplus because Democrats are going to be in power for an extraordinarily long time, which means it's very difficult to believe that even if it was rolled back, that would be necessary. Additionally, that legislation competition would just be put back into place even if there was a rollback because you have conceded our midterms preemption on this argument. Additionally, the solvency surplus advantage 2 outweighs this argument's risk of a rollback is not good enough. Our arguments preempt 100% of this anyway. Additionally, you conceded the argument that we solve a better internal link for your bullying arguments, which means that even if there was a risk of rollback, we still have a solvency surplus over the case. That means that you should assume a world in which we don't. Additionally, permutation is not net beneficial. It still links to our Supreme Court politics dissad. You conceded the argument that net benefits is the framework for conceiving of comparative competition, which is the reason why you should not privilege these arguments. You do not have a solvency deficit argument. Additionally, you say that you saw the advantages. We have arguments indicating why we solved it better. Then you say that this would enable them to avoid a liberal win. Our argument is that that is only intrinsic to the permutation and the plan. The counterplan avoids that argument because we are a Congress counterplan, which means this is not preemptive enough. Additionally, you say that Congress can check. That argument does not make sense. Our argument indicates why Congress has the capacity to check your affirmative. If that's the case, then that argument goes our direction. Additionally, you say that you solve probability, and this could be rolled back, and the GOP would not be pressured. These arguments are not responsive to the preemption on the subject. You conceded that we have either equal fiat durability in terms of your conception, or that the counterplan would be stronger, which means you have to answer our preempts on this subject in order to get out of this. There's a large propensity that even if that were the case, it would go our direction. Additionally, the precedent does not just go one direction. There have been multiple Supreme Court rulings in different directions, which is the reason why the courts would likely stay out of congressional action in this particular instance. It is the reason why they would not want to do that, which is the reason why there is not a solvency deficit in terms of the counterplan debate. You have to answer our preempts on this subject in order to go for these arguments in the P and R. That is not good enough. We have a solvency surplus over all of your case, and the counterplan would not be rolled back. You don't have a basis for the argument that it would be ruled as unconstitutional. This argument would be new in the PMR, and it would require an enormous amount of extrapolation. You concede all of our preempts that answer 100% of these arguments, which means there's zero reason why you should embrace their strategy. And all of your arguments are defense. You read a couple impact terms, they'll answer this argument. You say it's not a business issue, but you conceded the argument that it would be framed as a business issue after your plan passes, which is a specific link argument that solves this. Additionally, you say non-unique, they're being restructured, they've reduced on the pollution index, but you have conceded several levels of internal link analysis indicating why that reduction of pollution is not good enough. For example, the fact that GMOs do not require, the fact that there is no requirement of environmental impact statement means that that is ultimately inevitable. You've also conceded the cross-contamination arguments, which control a better internal link to these arguments, and the 09 study is more specific on this question. It indicated that there was a massive increase in herbicides that are attributable to be GMOs, which means you should privilege the specificity of our arguments. You conceded that there was no check on GMOs in the status quo, which means the fact that there was a small reduction in pollution irrelevant. You say GMOs good because of developing countries, not a good argument. We're talking about Monsanto, who uses things like Terminator seeds to make it impossible for developing countries to use their seeds again and again, which means they have to continually rely on developed countries, which is the reason why GMOs are not good in this instance. Even if this is true in a general principle, it does not apply to the Monsanto Corporation. You say it's key to third world restructuring. Our argument is that GMOs are not good for that. Alternative models of food aid are ultimately preferable. You've also conceded the argument that this would cause a collapse of food aid, which means all of these billions of people who exist in the third world would immediately die of starvation before they would have the ability to restructure, which means we'll control the time frame debate on this question. You talk about terrorist recruiting. There are multiple alternate causalities for this argument. Additionally, there's more likely to be an increase of terrorism in a world where we have to absolutely cut off our food. And you say technology solves. Environmental impact statements are a prerequisite to understanding what kinds of technologies we have to apply. Additionally, you say the erosion internal link is gone. You conceded specific arguments on this question. Extend our internal link assessment. This is a bad defensive argument. You say that monoculture is good and the genetics are under control. Monoculture is not good. You've conceded the argument that it is the root cause of a reduction in food aid, which controls a larger internal link to this argument. Additionally, you conceded the carbon sinks argument and the argument that it actually reduces yields, which is our USC report 09 argument, which indicates that it does hurt food security. And you conceded our dead zones argument and our Gulf spillover argument, which controls a larger internal link. Even if monoculture was sometimes good, it's not good in this instance.